Well, we thought he'd be in the White House this morning talking about jobs, unemployment, and the economy. But instead, it turns out President Obama made a surprise visit to Afghanistan. He was given a warm welcome by troops there. He spoke of America's support for the work they do and also praised those leading the efforts there, especially General David Petraeus.
This is somebody who has helped change the way we fight wars and win wars in the 21st century. And I am very grateful that he agreed to take command of our efforts here in Afghanistan.
Fighting and winning wars in the 21st century. Let's talk about this. I've got Jake Delberto in our Los Angeles studio. Jake, of course, with Rethink Afghanistan. Jake, what wars exactly have we won in the 21st century?
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, I think that we took an unnecessary war, Iraq, and we turned that into a stalemate. And we took Afghanistan, which we still don't even understand what we're doing there, quite honestly. We're building a nation state. We're conducting a low-intensity conflict against the Taliban, which we don't really know who they are. It's sort of difficult to say what wars we have won. But it is clear to say that 10 years later, and $1 trillion and 5,000 American lives lost, we still have no end in sight for the open-ended war on terror question mark.
I think it's interesting, too, you brought up the Taliban. I know that you've done some research for Rethink Afghanistan. What should Americans know about the Taliban, their power, their strength?
Well, we should know that the Taliban is a rural Pashtun movement of a very conservative, old-school religious Muslim tradition. They're not anything that is predictable. They don't operate in the way that Westerners or even that Europeans think. They largely kind of mull about their day as they want. And the Taliban have been in place there for about 45 years, but that old-school ideology, religious framework has been in place for as long as Afghanistan has been there, for going back thousands of years.
Let's play another clip from the president's speech this morning, this one talking about the future and what's ahead for the mission in Afghanistan.
Because of the progress you're making, we look forward to a new phase next year, the beginning of a transition to Afghan responsibility. As we do, we continue to forge a partnership with the Afghan people for the long term.
Now, along these same lines, we came across the transcript of another speech from another president. I'll go ahead and, for our viewers out there, I want to go ahead and read this. We have adopted a plan which we have worked out in cooperation with the, insert country here, for the complete withdrawal of all U.S. combat ground forces and their replacement by blank forces on an orderly scheduled timetable. This withdrawal will be made from strength and not from weakness. As blank, insert country here, forces become stronger, the rate of American withdrawal can become greater. So, for our viewers out there, any guesses who this might have been? Jake?
Well, it sounds like George Bush in Iraq. But
it's a good guess. This was actually Nixon's address to the nation on the war in Vietnam, that speech given on November 3rd, 1969. And there are some eerie similarities. Obviously, Jake, tough.
You know, that would be guess number 2, Chrissy. That would be certainly guess number 2.
Well, then that guess would have been right. Tough decisions, though, for the president on Afghanistan. But do you think he and his advisors truly believe, with the sentiment there, that there will be a victory day for the future in Afghanistan?
I think that we're going to see a lot of posturing, and I think that we're going to see a lot of promoting of good talk and good rhetoric, but I want the viewers here to see, and if I could say to the administration candidly, everyone knows that Al-Qaeda is our threat. It is a very real organization. It is not an existential threat. They do not have the capabilities to take over the world. And so if we really want to keep the world safe and America safe, we need to target Al-Qaeda. We don't need to be nation building. And there's a way to target Al-Qaeda and not build nation states in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iraq and everywhere else. That's what I would tell the president, and that's what I tell anybody watching this program as well.
Well, what's the way, Jake? I mean, a lot of people probably would agree with you. So what's the next step down that path?
Well, first step, we got to get our forces out of Afghanistan. And myself and Matthew Ho and others that have come out very strongly and said that we need to get a withdrawal. We need to bring our troops home at a calculated step. And I know for many people in Washington, this may sound simple, but when you want to get out of a war, you get out of a war. You say, General Petraeus, come back in a couple weeks and tell me how we're going to get out of this thing. And we're not going to get out of it by staying here forever. So that's step one. Step two is a well-resourced, ruthless partnership with the international world to ruthless and targeted attempts at al-Qaeda, at terrorist cells across the world, knowing that you're not going to be able to wipe them out, because it's like saying, if you're saying I'm going to wipe out al-Qaeda, it's like saying I'm going to wipe out Christianity. It's not possible. Once an ideology gets started, it's there forever. But we can contain it, and we can protect American citizens against attacks thwarted towards us. Like we saw, the reason 9/11 happened was because we were stupid. We opened up our doors and we let anybody come in without any protection or security at airports. So calculated, targeted attacks against al-Qaeda and a intelligence effort to keep us safe.
I also just want to go back for a second to sort of the transition. One of the reasons the president went to Afghanistan was to meet with President Hamid Karzai. Of course, bad weather prevented them from doing so. President Obama always optimistic and cheerful about President Karzai. But this week we learned some interesting things from those WikiLeaks cables about how leaders here in the U.S. really feel about him. This is a headline we found in The Guardian. WikiLeaks cables portray Hamid Karzai as corrupt and erratic. Diplomats describe Afghan president as weak, indecisive, paranoid, and beholden to criminals to maintain power. So this is the man that the U.S. is going to hand that power over to?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you consider who is in the Karzai government. And, when you go to Afghanistan, I was just in Afghanistan a few months ago, when you go over there and you talk to U.S. diplomats, everybody says, well, look, it's not the United States. We got to work with what we got. I say, okay. You may have to work with what you got, but the American people don't. We don't have to tolerate supporting corrupt governments and sinister behavior like Hamid Karzai's brother, who's one of the world's leading heroin dealers. So no, we don't have to tolerate that, and we don't tolerate that. And more and more Americans are going every day recognizing that the war in Afghanistan is a massive, massive failure, and that we need to stop supporting those people. And if we don't, we're just sending dollars might as well take a bunch of money and burn it.
Certainly a good thing, though, for those troops to see the president there in Afghanistan. Just real quick, what does that do for them to have the president there?
Well, look, when you're a soldier and you're deployed overseas, it gives you an immense amount of positive emotions when you get to see your commander-in-chief come and visit you. But the problem is the commander-in-chief can't visit the forward operating bases where those troops are under extreme stress. In Bagram Air Base, there's McDonald's and Pizza Hut and things like that, and those soldiers, they're in the rear with the gear. And granted, they have their own stresses, but the real troops are on the front lines. And it would have been nice to see the president get to them, but of course he can't because it's not safe.
All right, Jake Gilberto with Rethink Afghanistan.